The day is coming in over the Trossachs, and the rising sun will soon light the whole length of Strathard, revealing a landscape rich in wildlife, history, folklore and legend. Ben Lomond, the most southerly of Scotland's mighty Munro Mountains, towers 3,195 feet above the landscape. Visible across half the country and a landmark since man first set foot here almost 10,000 years ago. However, these little hills are every bit as important as Ben Lomond itself. It was to here to this very place in 1298 that the Abbot of Inchmahome Priory banished the little people, leaving the entire area between Stirling and Aberfoyle a fairy-free zone. The little people had become rather troublesome to their human neighbours, and the abbot ordered them to pack up their goods and chattels and remove themselves and their belongings here to the vastness of Strathard. The tradition and memory of the fairies has been handed down to me in a great number of stories. The best authenticated tale concerns a small boy born and raised locally, who was befriended by the fairy folk themselves. It seems this lad could enter the underworld and return home with no time penalty whatsoever. In his real world, of course, he lived in abject poverty, and yet whilst visiting his fairy friends, he found he was surrounded by untold wealth. Everything in the underworld, if not made out of solid gold, would be lined with gold, even the great caverns themselves. Realising the value of all this gold, and believing it could help his family's financial situation, he succumbed to temptation, stealing away with a small ball of pure gold. The fairies quickly reclaimed their lost treasure, and the young boy realised that not only had he lost his precious metal, but the friendship of the fairies. He never ever saw them again. And although he knew well where the entry to the underworld lay, at the burnside, where the water came down the hill at the back of the croft, never again was it open to him. In the way of many young people brought up in the country, he took a different path in the world, becoming a minister in the church. Eventually, he became a bishop in the Scottish Episcopal Church, and finally an archbishop. And if you cannot believe the word of an archbishop in a matter of this kind, then whose word can you believe? Strathard is only one of 4 major entries into the Scottish Highlands, and has been of great economic and strategic importance throughout her history. But just over the hill lies Scotland's best kept secret, Glendu. Completely encircled by mountains and well hidden from view, It's given shelter to countless generations of people who've been born, raised and lived out their lives here, and to numerous individuals and organisations who've come here for sanctuary. One of those groups were the historic Knights Templar. Following the Crusades, these warrior priests were in great demand as mercenaries, for which they were well rewarded. They then began to lend vast sums of money to European rulers. Two of these are very powerful and dangerous men, the Pope Clement V and Philip IV of France. And rather than repay their debts, they decided to have all the Templars murdered. The date set for this mass assassination attempt was the 13th of October, 1307, which was a Friday. There were survivors, however, not many, but some, and it was here to Glendew they came to regather, reappearing 7 years later alongside Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn. This glen was cleared along with many others at the time of the great clearances, and now only these dry stone walls remain to tell the stories that people once listened to round the fires at night, tales told by the Shanachies and passed on by word of mouth from one generation to the next. These rather insignificant stones, half buried amongst the grass and the heather, also speak to me of an ancient history. Among the small grave markers is this very unusual stone. Said to be a slab, a grave marker of a Knights Templar. Water flows quietly where once children splashed and played. The music of the glens, the laughter and the tears left with the people, but the stories still remain to be told by the shadows of the hills, the wind in the trees, and me.